Hi everyone, my name is Roxanne Giobto, a Bachelor of Science in Secondary Education, major in Social Studies. For now, I am going to discuss to you about Commonwealth time and Japanese regime. Let's first define what is Commonwealth period. The Philippine Commonwealth was the name of the Philippines when it was still controlled by the United States. Manuel L. Quezon was the first Filipino head on unelected government of the Philippines. So this is the picture of Manuel L. Quezon. Next, the Philippine Commonwealth era was interrupted when the Japanese occupied the Philippines. In January 2, 1942, the Commonwealth government led by Manuel L. Quezon and Sergio S. Osmeña went into exile in the U.S. Quezon died of tuberculosis while in exile and Osmeña took over as president. At the same time, the Japanese force installed a puppet government in Manila headed by Jose P. Laurel as president. This government is known as the Second Philippine Republic. On October 20, 1944, the Allied force led by General Douglas MacArthur landed on the island of Leyte to liberate the Philippines from the Japanese. Japan formally surrendered in September 2, 1945. So almost 2 months pod usa ni surrender ang Japan. Next, after liberation, the Commonwealth government was restored. Congress convened in its first regulation season on July 9, 1945. It was the first time that people's representatives have assembled since their election on November 11, 1941. So, it's been 4 years ang nilabay na usa ni balik ang election. Manuel Rojas was elected Senate President and Elpidio Quirino was chosen President pro tempore. Jose Zulita was Speaker of the House while Prospero Sanidad became Speaker pro tempore. The first law of this Congress enacted as Commonwealth Act 672 organized the Central Bank of the Philippines. The Commonwealth deals also tackled the issue of collaboration. In September 1945, the Counterintelligence Corps presented the people who were accused of having collaborated with or giving aid to the Japanese. Included were prominent Filipinos who have been active in the puppet government that the Japanese have been established. A people's court was created to investigate and decide on the issue. Amidst the sad state of affairs, the third Commonwealth elections were held on April 23, 1946. Sergio Osmeña and Manuel Rojas vied for the presidency. Rojas won, thus becoming the last president of the Philippine Commonwealth. The Commonwealth era formally ended when the United States granted independence to the Philippines. As scheduled on July 4, 1946, and our Independence Day are now changed into June 12. The next topic is all about Japanese regime. The Japanese occupation of the Philippines. Japan occupied the Philippines for over 3 years, until the surrender of Japan. A highly effective guerrilla campaign by Philippines resistance forces controlled 60% of the islands, mostly jungle and mountain areas. MacArthur supplied them by submarine and sent reinforcement and officers. Filipinos remained loyal to the United States, partly because of the American guarantee of independence, and also because the Japanese had pressed large number of Filipinos into work details and even put young Filipino women into brothels. Hours after Pearl Harbor, war came unexpectedly to the Philippines. Japan opened a surprise attack on the Philippines on December 8, 1941. When Japan attacked without warning, just 10 hours after the attack on Pearl Harbor, Japanese troops attacked the islands in many places and launched a pincer drive on Manila. Aerial bombardment was followed by landing of ground troops in Luzon. The defending Philippines and United States troops were under the command of General Douglas MacArthur. Japanese rules for Filipinos 1941 to 1945. So mo ni siya ang nga gisakop sa Japanese ang mga Filipinos within almost 4 years pod. The first rule is salute to the Japanese soldiers when you met them. Number 2, the Japanese flag should be displayed at every house's door. Number 3, everybody must put the sunrise armband on the left arm. Number 4, everybody should have the certificate of residence. Number 5, whenever you see Japanese soldiers, you must welcome them and not escape from them. The escaper will be considered as the enemy. Number 6, unless you do not tell false prices, you will be paid reasonable. And number 7, you are absolutely prohibited to walk until the sunset, until the sunrise without carrying lamps. The walker who has not lights will be shot by the Japanese patrolling soldiers without any warrants. And number 8, don't be fooled and bewildered by false propaganda by communist bandits and Chinese. Number 9, the incendiarism, accidental fire, and robbery will be punished. Number 10, the holding of arms is allowed by the army, but the arms holders must report to the mayor it and get permission from. Number 11, the jobless people can find one's job in Japanese army and will be obedient to the orders of governor and mayor who are authorized. Next, the Japanese influence. During the Japanese occupation of the Philippines during World War II, the Japanese influenced the government in the Philippines by enforcing a strict curfew, adding Japanese currency, instituting a military government, and reducing neighborhood government system by half. The occupation also cost the lives of over 1 million people in the Philippines. The next slide is the lives of the Filipinos during the occupation. During the occupation of the Japanese in the Philippines, they run the Philippines with an iron hand. They instilled fear, declared martial law, they imposed curfews, they ordered that anyone who opposes them or even those who are just accused of doing against the Japanese were punished and killed. Singing of the national anthem and raising of the national flag was prohibited. Use of radios and transmitters was also prohibited. Political parties, elections, and public assemblies were put on a half. Schools, printing presses, telegraphs, and radio station were closed down. Everything was controlled by the Japanese. So that time, grabe kayo ang pagsakop sa mga Japanese sa Filipinos within almost 4 years pod nga pagsakop sa Japanese sa mga Filipinos and also grabe ang ilahang mga protocols or ilang mga rules nga gipasunod para sa mga Filipinos. And this ends my discussion. Thank you for listening.